Hey, Jeffrey Pepper Rogers back with another episode of Guitar Sessions, and today's topic, slash chords, what they are and how you can use them to sweeten the sound of chord progressions and make better bass lines. So I'm going to run through some slash chord examples, and we're going to try them out in a progression from a classic song, Mr. Bojangles by Jerry Jeff Walker. So as in all the episodes from this series, you can find the charts for everything that I'm doing over on Patreon. So first of all, what do I mean by slash chords? The slash is in the notation like a C/G or a C over G. All that slash means is that you've got a note other than the root on the bottom of the chord. So there's some different types of slash chords. Some are inversions, meaning you take another note in the chord and put it on the bottom. You take the third or the fifth of the chord, for instance, and put it on the bottom. So a few examples of that, putting the fifth on the bottom. This is a C over G. So I've taken the G, which is the fifth of a C chord, and put it on the bottom, on the sixth string. This F over C, F/C. Put the fifth on the bottom, which is that C note on the fifth string. Here's a D minor over A. A is the fifth of a D chord. Or an E minor over B. So I'm just not playing the sixth string there. So my lowest note is that B on the fifth string. Some examples of slash chords with the third in the bass. Real common one, a D over F sharp. So I've got that F sharp, the third of a D chord, on the sixth string. A G over B. So if I don't play the sixth string and I make that B on the fifth string the lowest note, that is a G/B, G over B. Here's another, an A over C sharp. So I'm playing a bar form of an A, but the bass note is that C sharp on the fifth string. So it's an A over C sharp. And here's one that's a little less common, a C over E. So that E, if I play the sixth string on the bottom, open, that is putting the third of the chord on the bottom, and we call that a C over E. So there also are slash chords where you put other notes on the bottom. Just a couple that I will mention here. Dropping the root of the chord by a half step or a whole step. So I've got a G chord here. If I were to drop that root by a half step, I've got a G over F sharp. That would tend to be a kind of a transitional chord leading somewhere, dropping the bass a half step. Another example of that, if I went from a C and then I went a C over B. So I've just taken that bottom note and dropped it a half step. And we'll see that in just a minute when we look at Mr. Bojangles. Or you could have slash chords where you drop the root a whole step. So going back to G, if I were to put an F natural on the bottom, that would be a G over F. Again, a kind of transitional chord. So an A, if I were to play a G underneath that, I'd have an A over G. And similarly, let me play a D minor here and put a C on the bottom. So a D minor over C. That would be another type of slash chord that you might use in transition from one chord to the next. So over on Patreon, you can download a chart with an extensive library of these kinds of slash chord shapes in a bunch of keys. So why would you use a slash chord? A couple of basic reasons. One is just for variety in the harmony. Every chord you play doesn't have to be based on the root. It can change up your sound a little bit in a progression. The second reason is that a slash chord with a note other than the root in the bass is a less resolved kind of sound. Chord progressions are all about tension and resolution, so using a slash chord could be a way to leave a chord progression less resolved, so then you can resolve it later. So a slash chord can help you create that effect. And finally, one of the most important reasons to use slash chords is to create better voice leading and bass lines. In a chord progression, you can create a bass line that moves in smaller increments, moves in half steps or whole steps instead of jumping all around. So the bass moves in small steps. And let me just give you some examples of what I mean by that. So take this little progression where I'm going from G to D to E minor. If I were to just play that with the roots in the bass, I got G, D, E minor. And my bass is going from G, D, jumping around, right? How about this version of it? G, so in place of that D up here, I used a D over F sharp, which means that the bass can descend. That's a sound you hear in tons of songs, and you got that bass line that just walks down the sixth string. Very similar idea if I were to play a C, G, A minor. Instead, I could do, so there I've got the bass going like that. How about this version of it? This time I'm doing it C to G over B in A minor. So my bass just walks from there down. Again, a sound you hear in tons of songs. So very similarly, if I'm in D, if I were going to play D, A, B minor, instead I could go D, A over C sharp, B minor. So the bass is moving down in small steps. So the slash chord just makes the movement between, through that little 3-chord progression, just a little smoother, keeps it moving in the same direction. Another way you could use a slash chord, let's say I've got a progression where I'm staying on D for a little bit and just going to a G. So just a 2-chord movement in this case. Well, if I were to take that time on the D chord and kind of break it up so that I'll start off with a D, but then go down to D over F sharp, to G, I've just created a little bass movement that's going to go down to that F sharp and then walk up a half step up to the G. Created a little momentum in that move rather than just going from the D. I got my D over F sharp, and G. Here's the same idea in a few other keys. If I were going just G to C, I could go G, another example, C, going to F. How about this? C, C over E to F. So I got a movement going. Or A, going to D. Instead I could go A over C sharp to D. So that slash chord is kind of leaning into the next chord there. In that progression, which otherwise might sound a little bit static, I've made the bass end of it move a little bit so it feels like it's going somewhere. So let's jump right into seeing how this works in Mr. Bojangles. And I'm going to play this here in C. The original version of this is played with C shapes, but capoed up on the 2nd fret, but I'm just going to play it here open. And starting on a C, but then walk it down. Here's a C over B, A minor, that's a C over G. So that little intro phrase. So a nice bass line created there, walking down. And that is the first part of the verse does that. Go to F to G. Do that all again. The next part of the verse, F, C. I'm going to play an E7 over B, A minor, C over G, it's a D7 over F sharp, G7. So you can hear how all that creates this momentum in that progression. You know, if you kind of simplified all this, really the chords would sound something like, I knew a man, Bojangles, and he danced a little, and worn out shoes. So that's got that kind of static sound. Compare that to. So those slash chords are really what makes that possible, the whole way that chord progression feels. So, and by the way, I cut off before I went into the chorus progression, but it's just Mr. Bojangles, A minor and G, Mr. Bojangles, Mr. Bojangles, dance, back to that again. So now let's just take that same progression and try it in a few other keys. as a way to just get a few other slash chord shapes under your fingers. So first let's just go to D. I'm just going to run through the verse portion of that progression. I'm going to go from D to D over C sharp, and I am playing, just because I find it a little easier, a bar version of a D, so I'm barring the first and third strings with my index finger so that I can easily reach over and grab that C sharp. B minor, and then that's a D over A. So do it again. Continuing. So let's try it out in G now. One more key, let's do it in A here. A over G sharp. So as you can hear, the slash chords are really what makes that guitar part really hang together, what makes that song move. So try out using slash chords in chord progressions as a way to add variety, as a way to create motion like that, as a way to create nice sounding bass lines. And again, you can download a big library of slash chord shapes over on Patreon. And I hope you find this useful, and thanks for watching. Again, I'm Jeffrey Pepper Rogers, and I'll catch you next time.